Today, we're going to be talking about strategies on maintaining calm during times of stress. I want to preface this by saying if you hear any dogs barking in the background, I apologize. My fur babies are sometimes difficult to control when it comes to post office and other, daily occurrences that come drive by. So I want to start by that. If you hear my dogs, I apologize. I locked them out, but we're making it work at home. So as I mentioned, we'll be doing this daily webinar on Thursdays at noon and 4:30. Just a few quick webinar logistics before we get into the meat of the content. As you've noticed, you're muted on entry. That is on purpose. I'm actually trying out this closed captioning for the first time to make this more accessible for our viewers. And so we wanted to make sure that we had as little feedback as possible on the back end with that. If you do have any questions, we'll answer those at the end if time permits. You can go ahead and enter those via the chat function. And a quick reminder that webinars are being recorded. If you choose to have your video on at this time, just be aware that that will be recorded. You do have the option to turn off your video for the duration of the recording. Thank you. A little bit of background on our organization. We are a company called the Adventure Group. We're based in Morgantown, West Virginia. We're an education nonprofit that customize our programming to serve students, educators, and families in West Virginia and throughout Appalachia. We're working on a bunch of cool programs as well throughout the United States that are related towards STEM, innovation, and family engagement. As part of the Adventure Group's programming, we recently received an award from the U.S. Department of Education to create the West Virginia Family Engagement Center. At that center, we have a 5-year grant to help families participate in their child's learning both inside and outside of school. So we work directly with 100 schools across West Virginia to provide resources to help them with family outreach and to get them engaged in hearing parent voice in the child's educational process. We're really excited about this opportunity to provide additional resources to our families during this time where they are working at home and they're, handling their child's learning at home as well. We know this is a stressful time and we're excited to provide this resource for you all as well. A little bit of background on me. I am Amber Ravenscroft. I serve as the Adventure Group's Manager of Innovation, which simply means that I get to come up with some really cool programs. Typically, I'm involved in the world of entrepreneurship education and STEM innovation, and I'm really excited to be presenting as part of the Quick Bites programming today on how to maintain calm in times of stress. I think it's really vital for us to remember that this is an opportunity for us to really interact with our children and to provide them, unprecedented opportunity to think about this time. I remember they say in terms of generational kind of points that stand out in your life, I was part of that group of children that went through 9/11. And I think this is the moment that your children, if they are young and they're in school now, will remember. And what they'll remember the most is how we as communities and how we as parents respond to that. And so I think the purpose of the Quick Bites webinars and the resources that we're providing families is really to support you in how we respond to that. So that the children can look back and not think of this as a really scary time, but as a time when their parents and the community was really there for them. And so I think we have an immense opportunity to work with our children in that aspect. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about stress and how to maintain calm in times of stress. So we have kind of 4 objectives for the webinar. The first is to define stress, which is a pretty broad overarching idea. And so we'll be going into a little bit about what stress is and how it manifests itself in ourselves and our students. We'll go into typical reactions to stressful situations, particularly in the COVID-19 context. I'll provide some strategies to support yourself as an individual, and then we'll wrap up the webinar with some strategies to support your family as a whole. So I think it's important that we define stress on the front end. We do this in many of our trainings is when we're introducing a complex topic, we like to define it. And stress is a normal reaction the body has when changes occur. It can respond to these changes both physically, mentally, or emotionally. And the key word that I want to really highlight here is the idea that stress is a normal reaction. It's a normal part of life. It can be brought on even by positive changes. And it's not just these current circumstances that are putting a lot of our families in stress. So I think the idea of normalizing stress as a whole is really important when we talk to our students about this, so that they understand that, yes, this is a stressful time, but stress is a growing opportunity for us. In regards to how stress can manifest itself in our lives and in our children's lives, it's important to know that there are many different ways this can be represented. Emotional symptoms, your students, you could be easily agitated or frustrated. You could be feeling overwhelmed and like you need control. You could have difficulty relaxing. I know personally that's how stress manifests itself in me. I find that I am one that cannot kind of take a break and relax. And I think it's important to know what your own kind of stress symptoms are. Physical symptoms, you could have low energy. You could be getting frequent headaches or feeling nauseous, have aches and pains. And also it can have a lot to do with nervousness and shaking. So if you feel that you are, you felt more nervous and on edge lately, it could be stress manifesting itself in that form. And I think a lot of times we often think about the emotional and sometimes physical symptoms of stress, but the cognitive symptoms are actually a lot more present in a lot of people that don't necessarily associate those with stress. So cognitive symptoms include constant worrying, our thoughts, we can't focus, we have racing thoughts and you can't really center on one idea. You have forgetfulness or disorganization and poor judgment. And so I think rather than going straight to easy agitation and frustration, we need to be reflecting on how could these symptoms of stress be manifesting in our children? How could they be manifesting in ourselves? And even if you're working in an at-home situation, how could those also be affecting our colleagues for our various interactions with them as well? And so given that stress is a part of our normal daily life, it's no wonder that in this current situation with COVID-19 and the current landscape that seems doubly, uncertain, that stress could be a typical trigger for our reactions. And so some typical reactions that you might see in these particularly stressful situations could be anxiety, worry, or fear, and that can be related to your own health, the health of loved ones. It could be related to the self-monitoring that you have to do, challenges around securing what you need when you're in isolation, especially for some of our more rural populations. And also, I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out the worry or fear associated with losing income or security in these times. You could be facing a lot of concern around effectively caring for your children and others that you might be responsible for. I know personally my mother is feeling a lot of stress related to taking care of my grandma, who is self-isolated at home, but it can be difficult, especially in rural areas, to figure out ways to provide care for those individuals while also being aware of the need for social distancing. You could be dealing with uncertainty and frustration about the future and how long this will remain the norm. I know, just as a side note for those listening, I am supposed to be getting married on June 12th. So it's one of those right on the cusp moments where if we take this seriously now, I could potentially still have my wedding, but there is a lot of uncertainty about that. And so I think stress in me manifests itself in not being able to really focus or to have strong feelings one way or the other. And so I feel like that is a big thing for me, is this uncertainty. And I know I'm not alone, and there are many life events that are being scheduled that we're uncertain of whether or not those can continue. I know a lot of our high school students are dealing with missed graduations, missed prom, and I think it's important to understand that that's a normal reaction to this situation, and we need to be aware of that. You could be feeling a lot of loneliness from the isolation, anger towards others for their negligence and possibly exposing you. I think if you are on social media, you are aware that there is a lot of kind of negativity associated in certain ways. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. You could have just a complete ambivalence about the situation because it changes day to day and you just are unsure of how to even respond to it. If you have had any kind of, or are familiar with anybody that has had substance abuse issues or anything involving addiction, this is definitely a time to check on those individuals, because this kind of uncertainty, high stress situations can really lead to a desire to seek out common coping mechanisms. And then we can have symptoms of depression for some of those that have those mental health concerns, where they're feeling hopelessness, they're losing their appetite, or they're sleeping a lot given the they're being isolated at home. So I think it's important to recognize not only the symptoms of stress and how they manifest themselves, but how different people react differently in stressful situations. And those were just a few examples of how we as individuals could react, how our children could react, and in recognizing those reactions, not as a response to you, but as a response to the situation, is really important. So a couple strategies that I'd like to cover to support us as individuals, to support you. I think it's really important to educate yourself. So I mentioned this briefly, this idea of social media being kind of the place that we go to for information. But it's really important that we seek out and share reliable information so as to not to really ignite public fear or confusion. Limit media news exposures. It's important to stay informed, but it's also important to stay positive. And I think providing yourself opportunity and structure around how you consume information in this period is really important. So be thinking about what are your current consumption methods for news, and how can you kind of adapt those to be a little bit more cognizant of how they are affecting your mindset. And then in terms of those who are facing insecurity related to financial means during this time, it's really important to seek financial information out from your employers and those that are directly involved in your accounts. So I'm in a couple of community groups, and I think there have been many things shared about, how to file for unemployment, how to get your utility bills covered. You want to make sure that you're getting that information direct from the source, and that you're not adding an additional level of stress by trying to navigate the non-verified resources that are available on social media. You also want to advocate for yourself. So you want to make sure that your basic needs are met, especially in some of those more rural areas that are losing some access to things. So make sure that you are connecting with your healthcare providers and local officials if you are having any difficulty accessing things that are considered necessities for your everyday life. And call to ask questions. I know a lot of our schools are still functioning from the administration standpoint, and I encourage you all to reach out to those individuals if you have questions regarding your students' remote learning opportunities and how you can be better serviced by those schools and your local communities. I think it's really important for adults as well to connect with others. So a big part of the stress is feeling that isolation. And so having a sense of community, even if it's virtually, is really important. Reach out to the people you trust daily. Try to reach out to your family members. This is a great opportunity for us to really engage with people that we might have kind of fallen a little bit out of contact with. This is an opportunity for you, while we do have some time, to reignite and rekindle those relationships and get to know people that you might not have talked to in a while, to really increase your connection to others. You can use tools like Zoom. We have done a Zoom happy hour with our colleagues at the adventure group. We are typically a remote workforce. A lot of the time we have a couple staff that are in different cities throughout West Virginia, but this has given us an opportunity to really be mindful about those differences. And use tools like FaceTime. I just downloaded this. This is interesting for if you have younger kids, or if you're just interested in playing games with anybody. It's kind of a fun tool. It's called House Party. It's an app on any smartphone that you can play like Heads Up. You can play Pictionary with people from all over. It's a great tool if you're looking to connect with somebody and still have some kind of emotional presence. And then you can seek out communities on social media that are directly facing some of the issues that you are having. So just be mindful about social media again. And then adopting coping strategies. This is, I think, one of my biggest challenges is, being mindful about how I'm coping with things instead of just, internally taking it in. So you want to practice relaxation strategies, deep breathing or stretching. Break up your stressful activities when you're at home with fun activities. And I love the idea of maintaining a positivity list. We will be doing a webinar on mindfulness, a whole webinar on strategies for that. And I think it's really important for us to remember that. I would have laughed about that 5 years ago and said, I don't need mindfulness. That's just a bunch of nonsense. But it's really important. And I've learned so much the value of taking a break and learning about how to effectively talk to myself and how to relax. And I encourage you all to look into that and to attend our webinar next lunch session next Thursday on mindfulness that I'll also be facilitating. So in terms of self-care, we talked about mindfulness, we talked about meditation a little bit. We'll go into that a lot more, but these are just 7 simple self-care activities that you can do in isolation. And they're kind of grouped by overall themes. So the first one being sensory, which is anything that appeals to the 5 senses. And this is for you individually, but also to be thinking about how this could be applied to your family or your local community. So an easy one for sensory is to listen to calming music. You can also do things around this sense of touch, like snuggling under a blanket, one of my favorite, cuddling with a pet. You can, focus on your breathing. If you're more tuned into positive or calming smells, you could light your favorite candle. There are a lot of ways to really focus in on one of your senses and have that be a way to calm and provide self-care for you. You could also do anything related to pleasure. So this is the balance of, working on things that are really structured and then providing an opportunity for you to engage in something that you really find fun. So I think a simple example is watch your favorite movie. There are tons of streaming services out there. I just watched last night Brother Bear, which has the kind of a nostalgic feel for me. It brought me back to my childhood, calmed me down, just let me kind of de-stress. I encourage you all to watch your favorite movie, watch with your family's favorite movie. You could journal, you can make art, you could as a family make your favorite meal. There are a lot of opportunities for you to find things and to engage with things that you just find truly fun and calming. Mental mastery, this is a big thing for me. Anytime I get stressed out, you can always go back to organization. So you can organize your closet. I organize my junk drawer. Everyone has one. Something like that kind of gets you out of your mind and is a monotonous routine task that can kind of take your mind off things for a little bit is really important. And so there are a lot of opportunities while we're stuck at home to work on mental and mastery practices. Spiritual, you just really could get in touch with your values and what matters to you. One of my favorite things to do is to read positive quotes. So I'll write down quotes that I think are really interesting or that are meaningful to me. You can list things that you're grateful for. We call this the best list. So top 5 things that we're grateful for is really important. And I think it's important to write them down and have them as a physical representation that you can come back to. Emotional, we need to, in this time especially, stop labeling emotions as good or bad and allow yourself and your children to just feel them. So whenever we're looking at, self-care activities around emotion, it's important that when we're educating ourselves on this, that we're writing it down. And if you want to have an emotion, you would just express that however you feel is important. This is a time where it's easy to bundle up our emotions to try to put on a strong face for our students and for our loved ones, but it's important to also allow yourself to feel those. Physical, you can bypass any unhelpful mental chatter by engaging in a physical activity. And so easy one, dance in your living room, put on your favorite song. So you're getting a mix of pleasure and physical. You can try yoga. There's a great YouTube channel called Yoga by Adrienne. She does focused yoga practices, including different body stretches, or also yoga for gratitude, yoga for reflection. I encourage you to try her out. Her channel is completely free. So it's Yoga by Adrienne. We've been taking a lot to doing that lately. And also something physical can be something as easy as taking a nap if you need it. I encourage people to take naps. And then the final self-care activity to highlight is social. So connecting to others is important. You can call a friend, you can join an online support group. There are a lot of book clubs available online if you're looking for something to do, or you could have a virtual lunch date like you are all doing with me today. So thank you for joining me as part of your social self-care. And then a few strategies, not that the ones that were listed previously are not applicable to your family, but these are specific practices from the National, I'm going to say it wrong, National Center for Families and Children Learning. I think I said it correct. So these are some strategies specifically during this time to support your family, especially with young children. I think it's important to remember that they are consuming information regardless of how you're trying to protect them from it. We talk about this a lot when it comes to, sensitive topics. Chances are they're communicating with their friends or they're on social media and they've received some information about the situation. That's why it's important for you to encourage questions and to help your children understand the situation individually. Regardless of whether or not you've actively engaged in the conversation with them, they understand to some level what's happening. And it's important for you to encourage questions so that they can talk about and validate how they're feeling. You can help them express those feelings if they're not comfortable engaging in one-on-one conversation by allowing them to express them in other outlets like drawing or different activities. So maybe they're feeling a lot of frustration, take them outside, let them run around, express some of that physical energy, and then that might lead to a more meaningful conversation on the back end about the current stress that they're feeling from the COVID-19 scenarios. And then I think it's important, I mentioned this a little bit, to clarify any misinformation that they're getting online because they are getting information online, and check in with them regularly. I know that we're looking at, daily or every other day updates from the government and that things are changing constantly. So it's important that not only do we stay up to date on the latest information, but that we disseminate that downwards to our students so that they're not feeling like they're out of the loop or overwhelmed. So you'll want to check in with them regularly whenever the situation changes and just communicate your own emotions to them so that they feel comfortable communicating them backwards. Couple strategies to support your family. I think it's important to recognize on the front end that this is a temporary situation, and that although we don't know the exact end date of this situation, that you all are in it together, and that there is promise that we'll come through this as a country and as a community. And self-care and coping are necessary, not just for us as individuals, but for the whole family to engage together. And some of the ways that you can provide support for your family is to modify daily activities to meet this new norm that we're in, and celebrate the accomplishments that they make. I read a tweet recently where there was a business owner and she's navigating, switching her entire business to online. She's trying to homeschool a first grader, and her husband's also a business owner. And so that's a very new norm when we consider what it means to take your business online, to try to navigate homeschooling your child, and to feel successful in those situations. And so what I want you to do, and what I want everyone to reflect on, is understand that this is a new norm and this is the reality that we're living in, and celebrate any small accomplishment that happens. And by doing that, you're also shifting expectations and priorities to focus on what gives you meaning. I think this is really apparent from anybody that's dealing with, parenting and teaching at home, that it can be a challenge, and we recognize it can be a challenge. And so give yourself some freedom to focus on things that you find meaningful and that your children and your community find meaningful, and so that you can really feel accomplished in those settings rather than trying to focus on doing everything at once. This is really important. I think possibly one of the most important components of this is the idea of modeling self-care strategies for your children. You want to make sure that we are exemplars of self-care in this time so that our children can recognize that. I know I am the first, even outside of this situation, to not model proper self-care. I can be very caught up in working. I have a very difficult time with work-life balance. I think this is a good opportunity for us to practice that and to model some of these strategies that were on the previous pages about how to relax and how to have fun and how to really hone into our emotions and our senses in a way that will have really long-term meaningful effects on our students. And then this idea of self-defeating statements, replacing them with helpful thoughts. This is just the idea of avoiding all or nothing thinking. I actually got this idea in this talking point from Noom. So I've recently gone through kind of being more mindful about my eating habits, but one of the strategies that they told us around self-defeating statements was whenever you have a negative thought, in your brain, literally say there's a thought and recognize that a thought doesn't necessarily have to be an action. And I think that's really important, and it's a good practice you could even have your children work through, that when they're having a negative thought, if they just respond to it internally with there's a thought, that doesn't mean that that will become and manifest itself as a negative action for them. So I really like the idea of changing all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking, to allowing flexibility and to really encourage, students and families not to think in black and white in this time, and to replace any negative self-talk, any negative thoughts with positive ways of reinforcing, how this is a growth opportunity for us. So different ages of students cope in different ways. And so I'm going to provide some highlights of how you can address these within different ages of your children in easy and simple to kind of remember opportunities. So for preschool, we really want to support and schedule for them. They need a lot of patience. They want verbal and physical reassurance. They want to express themselves. Remember back to the idea of expressing emotions through play and storytelling, and allow for short-term changes and sleeping arrangements. So as I mentioned, adjust to this new norm. Let them kind of have say in the new norm, and then they'll have a lot more ownership about how to maintain calm in their own home. For school-age children, so this is like late elementary, middle school, we need structure and engagement, but really remember play, patience, and tolerance. So we want to make sure that they're staying in touch with friends via their internet. They're right on that cusp of where they're really involved in like video games. They're trying to seek out social media. Give them structured opportunities to interact with their friends online. I think that's really important for them to also have a sense of community outside of the family structure. Engage them in educational activities. Create a structure for chores, make sure that there's some sense of normalcy about their life that they can kind of hold on to, so that they are feeling calm and know what their expectations are of them. Teenagers, I feel for the parents that have teenagers right now that are, missing some of the big parts of their life. And I'm sure that teenagers are feeling some resentment towards that. But what we can do for them and to help them cope with this situation is to help manage and model. So we want to continue the routines that we have in place, adapt them to meet the new norm, of course, and encourage discussion, but don't force it. We want them to stay in touch with, their friends via the internet, phone, video, but also put some limitations on making sure that they are also being physically active, that they're not using that as kind of a crutch to get through the day, but that they're, meaningfully engaging in communication with their friends, so that they still have that sense of community, but that they're still maintaining some kind of balance of a daily life. We want them to participate in family routines. And I think a good way to empower teens is to talk to them about how they are modeling, if they do have younger siblings, modeling for those younger siblings, and explaining to them that in these uncertain times, those younger siblings will really be looking up to them. And so this is an opportunity for them to really model what you are modeling as the adult, so that it's this continuum of calm in the home. So those are just some strategies. Like I said, there is no expectation that anybody would be able to adopt all of these strategies. I think what's important is for you to pick one or two that really work for you and remind yourself to participate in them every day. So for today's takeaway, I would like you all to reflect individually about one self-care activity that you can start doing for yourself and one coping activity that you can do for your family. When you've decided on this, you can share with us on social media using hashtag #StayHomeWestVirginia. And you can tag us at WVFEC on Twitter and find us on Facebook at /The Adventure Group. We're also online at bit.ly/WV-FEC. We have a lot of different resources available on there. We have a webinar archive for other webinars if you've not been able to join us. And we'll be updating with our Thursday Quick Bites sessions as we schedule those. So we have them right now scheduled out through next week. I encourage you all to join us, and we'll be sending follow-ups individually afterwards to all of our registered guests as well. We just are thankful for you taking 30 minutes of your time to be with us during your lunch hour. It is important to take a break, and so we appreciate you taking that break with us. And we hope that some of the strategies that were shared here, while they might be simple, are really meaningful to you. We've been thankful to offer some one-on-one sessions for some of our West Virginia Family Engagement Center schools, and we thought that this was a great public tool for us to share with other individuals as well that might be looking for some resources. So we appreciate you. If you have any questions, you can contact me at ravenscroft@edvgroup.org. My cell phone is on there. If anybody needs any support, if you want any of your students that need mentorship, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are here for everyone that is struggling in these